Good afternoon, bonjour, greetings, hello, howdy, hi, and so on and so forth. We are going to just give it another minute for everybody to trickle in from the waiting room, and then we will get started. So for now, as Depeche Mode said, enjoy the silence. All right, and now the silence will be shattered. Thank you for joining us today, everyone, for this webinar on recruiting and retaining today's youth workforce with FirstWork. My name is Donald Goosey Sala. I'm the Director of Workforce Development with Restaurants Canada, and I will be the host for today's session. And for those of you who may know me, I assure you I will not include my bad puns in the webinar, but I will try to integrate some maybe some humor every now and then. Before we begin, we have housekeeping. Few things to go over. Everyone's microphones and cameras will remain off during the session so that we can minimize background noise and everyone will be able to focus on the session. If you experience any technical difficulties, please message our team through the chat box and they'll be able to assist you. And we do encourage you to participate. We would love for you to use the Q&A box anytime you have questions or thoughts or anything that you'd like to share. There will also be, towards the end, a Mentimeter, a poll that will be displayed for you to access through your smartphone or your computer. And we would really like your input when we get to that point because it will help us to build out the resources that we intend to create to support you and your teams with youth employment. Also, this session is being recorded, so now everybody has a recording of me holding a dust thing. We will be sending a link to the recording along with the slides and resources to everybody who registered. So don't worry about capturing everything or furiously jotting down the notes. You will get access to all of it through the recording that is sent. And to give you an idea of how this will proceed, the structure will be as follows. I will finish the housekeeping, and then I'll provide some context and share insights from Restaurants Canada on what is driving the youth unemployment gap, why we're partnering with FirstWork to develop solutions, and what some of those solutions might look like in a general sense. Then I'll be joined by Akasawa Alagaratnam, the Executive Director of FirstWork, and Ikram Abdi, who is the Event and Training Lead with FirstWork. And they will go through a number of slides and a presentation to share strategies and practices for recruiting and retaining young talent. And then finally, we'll wrap up with a Q&A portion where we will try to address all the questions that have been put into the chat or any questions that arise at that time. So now that our house is in order, we'll get started. So you can see on the screen the agenda. I'm not going to go through the agenda. We will start right here. Oh, no, go ahead to the next slide. Thank you very much. So I think to begin with, it's really important to speak about sort of how we feel about hiring youth and some of the barriers versus the realities. So I think that statement I put at the top that soon there will be a college course in eye contact sort of highlights how we might feel when it comes to youth employment. We know there are challenges. We know that it's a very unique generation that is growing up right now, and we need to address some of the challenges that we're facing. So the realities that we see when we look at some of the data is that youth unemployment is rising. It's gotten to a point where some people are calling it a crisis. There are a whole host of reasons for that, which we won't go into right now. Also, enrollment in post-secondary school is declining. So with enrollment in post-secondary education declining, you have more youth that are not only unemployed, but are not following the typical path to get into the workforce. And that includes things like culinary programs, which are feeders for our industry. But the reality is youth are going to be the key demographic for achieving a sustainable workforce. Whether, regardless of what we may think about it, the young people of today are going to be the middle-aged people of tomorrow, and so on and so forth. So we need to be able to employ them, and we need to find solutions to these challenges. So what are some of the barriers that we're seeing? I've highlighted a couple here. I've tried to sort of provide some catch-all examples. Lack of experience, later first jobs is one of the things we're seeing. I had my first job when I was 14. I'm now hearing it's fairly common for people to not have work experience until they're in their late teens or even until they're 20, which is unimaginable for me, probably unimaginable for a lot of people on this call, but it is becoming the reality. And that can perhaps be correlated with some of the unrealistic expectations that we're hearing about from employers when they talk about their experiences with employing young people. And then, of course, there are generational changes in behavior in interpersonal relations. This is common from one generation to the next. I know there were all sorts of articles and studies done on millennials when millennials were the youth generation. I think it's fairly common for one generation to look at the next one and really see these changes and differences. But I think some of the changes in behavior and the changes in the approach to interpersonal relations right now are perhaps being felt a little more acutely and a little more significant just due to some of the changing realities of our society. So we'll try to address those as well. And as we move to the next slide, that was excellent. Well done. Thank you. We want to show you a little bit about what we've heard from food service employers thus far. We have surveyed some food service operators in the industry, and so we see some of the top issues with concerns about employing youth are unreliability and a lack of commitment. So people not being reliable is pretty obvious, but also not staying on the job. Sometimes you hear about people who don't even come to the interview, or they're given a job opportunity and they don't show up at all. Inattentiveness and underdeveloped soft skills, and this connects with the communication challenges you find in the second bullet there. And we've been hearing for at least 10 years now that soft skills are one of the most important areas for people to be trained in and to be proficient with when they're going into the workplace. But this is becoming even more critical because of what seems to be a certain soft skills deficit within a percentage of the youth population. The least confident areas that we've heard from some food service operators in employing youth are setting and managing expectations. So not just wages, but also responsibilities, what people are expected to do on the job, how they're expected to do it, and so on and so forth. Also speaking to youth values. DEI has been a hot button topic for a number of years, maybe not quite as much as it was 2 years ago now, but it's still something that's on the mind of a lot of young people, as is environmentalism. And so questions are being asked of employers that, say, my generation wouldn't have been asking when we were looking for work. And so it's something that we need to be able to respond to. Accommodating communication and learning needs in order to really speak to youth in a way that connects with them and meets them where they're at are challenges, as well as providing clear and effective instructions so that they can actually perform the tasks and understand the training that's being provided. The typical methods of communication and training don't necessarily seem to be resonating in the same way. And then finally, the youth candidate expectations, right? Career progression and training opportunities, questions around career pathways are something that we need to be able to respond to, answers about tip pooling and pay transparency. And some of this is going to be legislated. There's certainly legislation in Ontario at the very least that is coming in early 26, which is going to have certain regulations around pay transparency and how salary levels are communicated. And it's not uncommon to see things like that in other parts of the country, as well as questions about mental health support for staff. Coming out of COVID, I think mental health was certainly much more on everyone's mind. No one could say that they hadn't encountered it either themselves or in someone they know or in a friend of a friend, that sort of thing. And so those questions around how staff are going to be supported with their mental health is something that is being talked about more and more. So proceeding to the slide that is forthcoming, what we intend to do with FirstWork is develop some tools to support restaurants with best practices on employing youth, because we think having the best practices and ideas of how to execute them will give you in-house knowledge and expertise that will support you with employing the youth demographic. We're working on it with FirstWork, and the reason we're working on it with FirstWork is because they are probably the largest, certainly one of the largest networks of youth employment agencies and programs operating in the country. They are specific to Ontario, but they do have a national footprint. They have collaborations across the country. I was actually meeting with a network in BC, Aspect is what they're called, and they mentioned FirstWork because they're doing work with FirstWork. So FirstWork really has the expertise to inform the toolkits and the best practices. And youth are youth everywhere, right? So this is not looking at how do you employ youth in Ontario or youth in Saskatchewan or youth in Newfoundland. This is how do you employ youth in general. So we'll be pulling in resources from across the country, and FirstWork is well positioned to support with that. If you are in other provinces, or if you're in Ontario, you are welcome to reach out to me. You see my email at the bottom of the screen there. I am more than happy to connect you with local employment service providers who are supporting youth job seekers and have the expertise to work with employers to improve employment outcomes when you are trying to employ youth. These service providers are located across the country, so please do reach out if you would like to be connected. And then if you're interested in some other resources, you see the link to the Canada Summer Jobs Grant there that can help you with offsetting the costs of employing people during the summer. So especially if you're looking to employ youth and maybe you'd like to get some subsidies or something to offset those costs, you're maybe hiring people over the summer who are out of school or on their summer break, the Canada Summer Jobs Grant will support with that. I'm not going to go into any detail about it, but it's certainly a resource you can access. And I'm going to stop there. And I'm going to hand the mic, figuratively speaking, over to Akosua, who will take you through some of the material.
Hi, folks, and thank you, Donald, for the introduction. Just reiterating, my name is Akosua. I'm the Executive Director for FirstWork. We are an association representing over 110 employment service agencies across Ontario, and we do sit on a larger Canadian coalition of community-based employability and training organization that has sister partners like us all over Canada, and that's who Donald had referenced as well. Aspect in BC is one of our sister collaborators. So first of all, we're really excited to be here. Thank you so much for joining us. I will start by saying entering this journey with Restaurants Canada seemed for us like a given because 40% of um, youth's first jobs are in hospitality, which is inclusive of our restaurant colleagues in the space. So we are very excited to be here and reiterating the objective of today and our journey with Restaurants Canada, because today is a little bit of a step one. Like our goal is to one day produce all these materials for you guys to make this easier. But one of our main objectives is also to introduce you to, if you don't already know, our membership is very much, I don't want to say free because it's not free. It's taxpayer dollars. So it's your taxpayer dollars at use. And we just want to go through today about how you can effectively utilize us. And then on this journey today, how we can work together with Restaurants Canada to develop an employer toolkit that could be utilized by you in attracting, hiring, and retaining your young staff. Right. So today we'll go high level over what we do generally. And then again, reiterating what Donald said, we will be asking some more robust questions, but I'll turn it over to Ikram to add that detail.
Thank you so much, Akosua. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ikram Abdi. I am the events and training lead at FirstWork, and I'm really excited to share more about this partnership between Restaurants Canada and FirstWork. This project is rooted in a simple but powerful idea. By combining industry expertise with workforce development research, we can build real solutions that make a difference for employers and young workers. Restaurants Canada brings the experience of operators from across the country, the day-to-day realities of running a business, hiring and managing staff, and FirstWork brings decades of knowledge supporting youth employment and connecting young people with meaningful career opportunities. And together we're aligning practice with research and industry needs with youth potential. But here's the important part: your input as employers is at the heart of this initiative. No one knows the challenges and opportunities of this industry better than you do. Your insights will ensure that we build what we build isn't just something nice, like a nice idea on a paper, but something that actually works in restaurants, something that addresses the real recruitment and retention issues you're facing every day. And through this collaboration, we're developing the toolkit that's designed to be practical and useful. It will provide guidance on things like inclusive hiring practices, effective onboarding, and engaging youth workers, all with the goal of helping you reduce turnover, build stronger teams, and create positive first job experiences for youth. And the impact goes beyond just solving today's staffing challenges. For many young people, restaurants are their very first workplace. And when that experience is positive, it not only helps them succeed in their next steps, it also helps position the restaurant industry as a place where youth feel welcome, included, and motivated to stay. I will pass it back.
Thanks, Ikram. And so just understanding the challenge from our perspective, what we noted were 4 critical things when we wanted to move this toolkit forward. One is limited soft skill assessment tools, right? So when you hire, one of the things our employment service providers know generally is employers, and Donald reiterated this, but want reliability, communication, and teamwork. But there is very few validated tools to assess soft skills early. And for outside of your resume for young people, most of the time this is their first job, so they don't have that experience, and often you're taking a chance on them. So as employment service providers, we try to work with these young job seekers early to identify what some of those skill sets are, where we can improve on them, and then how we can get to it in terms of moving them forward. Some of the challenges we've heard from our membership that youth are facing right now is and challenges generally is that employers in restaurants and hospitality generally often need youth for summer and seasonal or short-term roles. And youth, depending on perspective, are hesitant with respect to unstable hours or low pay, and oftentimes try to look for, especially now with the work from home introduction in our lives, look for flexible options, right? So as employment service providers, we try to identify those youth and have stronger discussions with our employer partners with respect to youth talent in the space and what they're willing to try out. Our Gen Zers, as a millennial myself, I understood the heartache people would see in millennials moving forward. But from a Gen Z perspective, Zs we find are very values driven. They're very concerned about fair treatment, predictable scheduling, opportunities to grow, and workplaces that respect that work-life balance. And if those conditions aren't met, oftentimes there is a steep turnover or retention rates are generally low. So what we try to do with clients is really coach them through, and this is both a job seeker and employers, to find a job fit with them, right? And often it's training youth earlier on with respect to soft skills on what to expect in an employment setting, right? And if you can tell, as I'm going through this, I'm sharing a little bit of the challenges, but absolutely some of the solutions that we work through. And first jobs for youth, of course, really take shape in terms of influencing their their career moving forward. A bad first experience can discourage future participation and increase turnover, and a positive experience um, you know, builds confidence, skills, and loyalty, and often is that additional referral method in which you get other job seekers, right, to your job. So those are some of the critical pieces in the space that right now. And the one thing I will articulate just before we move forward to the next one is that youth right now, as Donald had articulated, the unemployment rate is high. It's sitting at 17.4% at the end of this summer. And because they make up about 40% of the workforce in accommodation and food services, it is critical in understanding what the gap is. And so for both of us in this call today, and that's part of it, is we are working together in terms of bringing the best tools for you, but also trying to introduce more of our young workers, because we do have a lot of job seekers. So how do we make sure that they stay connected and do so in a way that fits the roles that you have to offer? I'm going to turn it back to my colleague Ikram to share a little bit about what we are hearing with respect to SME barriers. Ikram, over to you.
Thank you. So small and medium-sized enterprises are truly the backbone of Canada's economy. A whopping 97.9% of all employers in Canada are SMEs. And in the restaurant sector, many of these are family-run businesses, often operating without elaborate HR departments. For most owners, HR isn't, a department. It's more something, kind of done off the side of their desk on top of their, running their day-to-day business, and that makes it harder to manage recruitment, onboarding, or retention in a structured way. For young people entering their first job, that can mean career pathways aren't always clear. They may see restaurant work as short-term instead of as a place to build skills and grow. And that's where our membership steps in. FirstWork employment service providers often act as third-party HR support for SMEs, helping with recruitment, onboarding, and connecting employers to diverse young talent. By doing this, we not only strengthen small businesses, but we also create better first job experiences for young people so that they see restaurants not as just a job, but as a place where they can belong and grow. I'll pass it back to you, Akosua.
Thanks, Ikram. So when we talk about inclusion, and we've discussed it a little bit today, we're not talking about a nice to have. At this day and age, it genuinely is a business and sector imperative. And restaurants and hospitalities do heavily rely on young workers, right? So um, especially there is newcomers, racialized individuals, and those that are balancing school and caregiving, right? So there's an approach of what does inclusivity mean in terms of improving recruitment and retention, and for youth, it's often predictable scheduling, flexible hours, opportunities to grow, and accessible onboarding that help on the youth end feel valuable, but on the employer end, ensuring that you're getting clarity from youth in terms of how they're like, are they understanding the role that they're supposed to perform? Are there things that they wish to articulate that you're not here, like you haven't heard from them because they're not speaking up, right? So those are some of the things we talk about when we're talking about guiding through the principles of building inclusivity in the workplace. So how do we ensure that workers know exactly what to expect? They know what their structured orientation is. They know what to expect in terms of scheduling, and from a retention perspective, they understand the need to go to their supervisors, talk to them, and have a good relationship that prevents and honestly helps in low turnover intentions. Those are some of the critical things that we're seeing with youth these days. And oftentimes our service providers do absolutely go in. So we go in early with, and it's typically small, medium restaurant owners that we work closely with, to make sure that we're understanding what your specific needs are, and then how do we build around it to ensure that your needs are clearly articulated to these youth, and there is an inclusion lens there, so that the youth know what is, because youth don't hesitate to ask, what's happening in their environment, what's happening politically, how is it affecting, like, how is a company responding to certain things. And the goal through this toolkit is also to guide you through some of those big questions, because some points you don't need to respond to those in a large narrative, but you just do need to show that you're open, right, to conversation. And so those are some of the conversations we do want to be able to build for you, and we do want to be able to have available through our toolkit. So as we go on this journey with you, I mean, today's session is hopefully, with the rest of our time today, we do want to get more input from you, but I will turn it over to Donald and invite him to share what we're hoping will be included in this toolkit that we will create. Donald.
Hooray. So the examples you see at the bottom of the screen are just that. They are examples. We haven't built the toolkit yet. Our intention is to build the toolkits based on the feedback we receive from the industry. So as I said, we have surveyed restaurants. There will be an opportunity for you to share feedback through a Mentimeter and some questions that we're going to ask you towards the end of this presentation. And of course, anything you put in the Q&A we'll have reserved as well that we can use to inform what we're doing. But when we consider what needs to be done and best practices when it comes to employing youth, we're talking about the entire employment life cycle, because we want to improve employment outcomes. We'll stick with outcomes. In a way that is robust and throughout the employment life cycle. So looking at recruiting, hiring, as well as retention. So writing youth-friendly job postings is one element of it. And job postings in general, I think what really is going to be looked at there is, the simple accessibility of job postings. There's been a lot of material that has been released publicly in the last several years about ways to streamline or improve job postings, especially moving on from the sort of standard way that job postings were written for most of the 20th century. So certainly looking at how to improve the accessibility for youth of the way job postings are being written, but also, and perhaps more importantly, conducting interviews in a way that's inclusive. So by inclusive, we don't mean in a virtue signaling or social responsibility sense. As Akaswa pointed out, we are talking about including the entire population, making sure that it's accessible for everyone, because the reality is, in Canada, we don't hit the replacement rate in our population. So that's one of the reasons why our country has relied so extensively on immigration and newcomers. And so we cannot afford to be erecting unintentional barriers or not adapting to meet the changing needs of existing parts of our domestic population. And youth, as Akaswa mentioned, today's youth, the Gen Zs, are much more values driven. They have different questions they want to ask, different things that they are considering, and they have different expectations as well. So that may mean accommodations for interviews in terms of having a more adaptable interview format, and as well as not just the types of questions that are maybe being asked or how they're being asked, which is probably the more important part, but also the kind of questions that they're more likely to ask you as the employer. We want you to be prepared for the kinds of things that they're more likely to ask you about so that you can respond. I think one of the more common things that we might be ready to respond to, certainly I have been when I've been doing interviews in the past, is questions about pay rates, as well as potential benefits, and things like that, more utilitarian things. But now with questions around values and work-life balance, mental health, and so on and so forth, the questions are changing, and they're not necessarily so utilitarian, and they don't necessarily have really cut and dry answers. So you need to be prepared for those questions. Once somebody has been hired, I think if we are able to provide something, some kind of guidance around onboarding and training and how to approach that with youth, especially when we look at some of the feedback we received from operators already around communicating expectations with respect to the way tasks are assigned, completed, the responsibilities in the workplace, as well as just ensuring effective communication so that the training is efficient and effective for the youth, because in the end, you don't want to be pouring unnecessary amounts of time into training new staff. You want to get them up to speed as swiftly as possible so that they can be as productive as possible as soon as possible. And that connects with the final point you see there about facilitating communications and retention. And retention obviously is a big one. So part of that is going to be, again, not just what is communicated, but perhaps more importantly, how it's communicated. And again, some of those expectations that we're going to have to adapt to with respect to the way youth are approaching communication. But this does go both ways. This is going to obviously look at some of those soft skills deficits that we've talked about, which we've heard about, and which have been talked about for at least 10 years now, with respect to potential workers. And part of this will be, how do we adapt our communication and how can we improve retention if we are trying to communicate with people who maybe don't have soft skills that are as sophisticated as we might expect when we bring people into the workplace. So these are the kinds of best practices that we will be looking to identify and provide you with, as the statement says, simple, actionable items for. We want it to be something that is easy to refer to and relatively simple to implement. This is not going to be a voluminous tome. It's going to be an easy to reference guide that will, give you an idea of how to proceed and what you might need to do. And obviously, you'll use the parts that make the most sense for your operation. So hopefully that provides some insights. It was sort of specific but vague for a reason, because we haven't developed them yet, but we will be working on it in the coming months. And as I said, we're almost at the point now where we're going to ask you for some feedback. So please do provide us with some input to help inform these toolkits that we're going to create. And Akasawa, you can continue on.
Thank you, Donald, and also reiterating that your input today is very much the goal of this discussion, right? We would love to get as much feedback as possible so that when we do create it, it's something that is of utility to you. So through this process, I believe this is today's is one of many to come, but I know Donald will give a glimpse for us into what additional supports are available for all of you. But from an employment service, the only pitch I will have while I'm on here is with respect to employment service providers. They are free to use for you, right? So please do not hesitate to reach out. If Donald, if you have questions about who to use, please, if you can contact Donald, he'll be happy to connect with us, and we can connect you to someone that's local and close to you if it's in Ontario, and if it's across Canada, he has those connects as well. And the one thing I will say for utility of our services is that CSJ is one, the Canada Summer Jobs are one program. There are several other programs that are available through our services that we can provide you that allow a little bit of funding with respect to training, or just aid with respect to getting hired. So in the meantime, while we're getting this toolkit ready, these are some options that are available. I'll turn it over to you, Donald, just to share some of your own sector resources that are available through Restaurants Canada. And if not, we can move into the question.
Yeah, so I won't spend too much time on it. Workforce development supports. This is relatively new with Restaurants Canada, and I'm fortunate to be given the opportunity to lead it. So, as Akasawa mentioned, we are building networks of employment service providers across the country so that we can connect you to the organizations that are supporting talent in your communities. There are a wide variety of options. It varies from province to province. And so some provinces, there may be networks like FirstWork that we can connect you with that can provide a single point of access to the cumulative talent pools of multiple providers. In some provinces, there may be one network for the whole province. In some provinces, there may be networks of organizations supporting different demographics. Some places have regional networks. Some provinces don't necessarily have well-defined networks. It's individual providers in the communities. So if you reach out to me, you'll find on Restaurants Canada's website under the resources option, there's a workforce development tab. There's a very short form you can fill out that gives me some of the salient details and pertinent information regarding your, basically who you are, how I contact you, and what you're looking for. And we can get in touch and discuss your needs, and I can share some of the options for you in your province or in your location, and then we can proceed based on what makes the most sense to you and what's a best fit for your operation. We are in the process of building the networks across the country. So in some places, we may not have as robust networks as others, but that's okay, because then I will just pivot and focus on the areas that you have identified. So not to worry. As Akasawa said, the employment service providers are everywhere. So it's just a matter of me redirecting my efforts when I see there's a need in a specific location. But in terms of other resources, there are, and I don't want to go through all of them, there are other projects, other resources Restaurants Canada has to support. So again, we can discuss that if you were to reach out about your hiring needs or just to inquire about workforce supports. We can certainly discuss some of our flagship initiatives. This building the toolkits on best practices for employing youth is just one example. We do have others. And on the website, we will be listing additional resources such as grants and subsidies that are available if you are hiring people that are available to restaurants. We do have a section that will include resources for restaurants per province, not just nationally. Just haven't had a chance to put the information into that part of the website yet, but it will be there. So there will be a host of resources under the workforce development section of our site, and my name and contact information are all over it, so you can't miss it, and very easy to reach out to me, and I would encourage you to do so that we can find some solutions for you.
Perfect. And at this time, I know just before we go into our heavy discussion set, we wanted to give you guys the option to ask any questions. Donald, do you want to add to this?
There's nothing in the Q&A right now, but yes, as I mentioned earlier, anything you put in the Q&A, we will have access to. Same thing with the chat. So any questions you may have about anything that we have discussed thus far, or rather said thus far, hasn't really been much of a discussion, but any questions you have about the topics that have been addressed, please feel free to share them. This is the chance to ask them and get more information, because after this slide, we'll be going into the Mentimeter where we are asking you questions. Okay, so there we do have a question. What is the biggest challenge to retain employees? Okay, so that's a question for the restaurants. I am guessing the person who is asking it might be a service provider. So I would simply refer to some of the findings from the industry survey that we listed earlier, and just pulling them up on my screen here. What we heard from operators are things like unreliability and lack of commitment, inattentiveness and underdeveloped soft skills, as well as challenges with communication. Setting and managing expectations can create barriers to retention, because if one person has, an idea that is entirely contrary to what the other party has, then you're going to find that there's a real disconnect, and someone is less likely to stick around. Career progression and training opportunities, mental health support for staff. If there are questions about this that people feel are not answered adequately, whether reasonably or not, again, they're less likely to stick around. Concerns about how to provide clear and effective instructions. If workers, for whatever reason, don't seem to understand the information that is being provided to them, then they're more likely to get frustrated or underperform. So these are some of the reasons for retention challenges. But yeah, that's really a question for the restaurants. And what I would really love is if any of the restaurants who are in in the room have any questions about what we discussed before we go to request your feedback. So there is another question here. How to manage so how do we manage generational conflicts between Gen Z and older employees who are not from the same generation?
So this is honestly a very common question because there is a little bit of, you don't know in terms of historical knowledge that older generations have that they often bring to the table, and Gen Zs are battling what they would say is they're not allowed to be innovative, or it's a tried and true, and oftentimes if it's something that is there's a healthy debate that happens in your workplace, or there's a need for supervisory interventions, if you will, it is highly dependent on the context and the situation. And what I will articulate is giving them an opportunity to have shared space where you can try new things and then also follow the rules gives, and I often find, especially our young people and our Gen Zs, when you have a give and take where you're given a little bit, and you're most likely to listen to the structures and the guidelines that are given also from your senior leadership. So there's a little bit of a give and take there. If there is only one side that is getting all of their voice heard, if you will, there will always be conflict and always be tension. Ikram, did you want to add to that?
I think, yeah, I think it is very much dependent on the culture and environment that is cultivated in an organization or a restaurant. And like you said, if all voices are heard, I think there's always a happy medium.
So I think this is something that would be, and this is why I really wanted the questions and the feedback. This is something that could be very useful for us to consider when we're putting the toolkits together, because I think this is a matter that can be addressed partially in some of the onboarding and orientation practices, but also some of the standard employment practices with respect to maybe the types of training or team meetings that are provided or hosted throughout the year in order to facilitate that communication and try to get everybody on the same page. So I really appreciate you sharing this. I will not mention your name because I don't want to shine a glaring spotlight on you, but thank you very much for sharing that, because it is an incisive question and one that's worth us taking into consideration when we build the toolkits. Are
Absolutely.
there any other questions or thoughts or comments before we vehemently solicit your input through a Mentimeter? I've been as overly verbose as I possibly can while asking for questions or feedback, but I think there's certainly been enough time, and we've had a couple questions. So as long as nothing comes into the Q&A or the chat while I continue to speak, then we will move on to the Mentimeter, which you see on the screen there, and I will let Akasawa walk you through it. I will just again mention that it's really important that we get your feedback here so that we have as much feedback from our members in the industry on building the toolkits for restaurants. So please, 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 please participate, engage, and give us your feedback.
Even if you're reiterating some of those questions you already put forward, that would be lucrative in terms of capturing it. So, what I will say, first and foremost, is you can just scan the QR code that is on the slide, and that will give you direct access to the questions to be able to put your responses in. Alternatively, if you want to head to menti.com, if you're on a computer, and type in the code that you see there in bold, that will allow you to also log into these questions. And while I give you a minute to log yourselves in. The one thing I will articulate is we're going to go question by question. There's only 4 questions that we're going to ask you. And the hope is you respond to as much as possible. I can happily share some of the responses that are in this Mentimeter, but this will really go to inform the larger discussion that's happening. While I'm doing this, because I see, first of all, thank you so much. I'm starting to see a lot of responses come into the chat. So I'll go through the first question, but essentially what the first question we're asking you is what hiring challenges are you currently facing? So in that, are there specific roles that are harder to fill with youth than others? Why do you think that is? Are there barriers you encounter when you're trying to recruit or onboard youth that are seeing as that you're seeing as huge challenges? Are there issues related to youth candidates' readiness, qualifications, or work habits that you find is often a barrier? And then, like, these are some of the questions while you're responding to this question that you're thinking of. And are there any internal organizational challenges, so lack of resources or HR capacity, that's impacting the development of recruitment or orientation practices targeting youth? So those are some of the things you can think about when you're responding. I've seen there's 12 responses so far in the chat, and I can articulate some of them. So for the first question on what hiring challenges are you facing, some of the things, oh, these are amazing. So some of the things that folks have articulated is finding youth that understand the commitment required of being a part of a team, i.e., you cannot have every weekend off as you need to work some, which is very fair. The other one is youngest employees tend to have the lowest retention. There is one where it's recruiting and retaining local talent is a problem. Desired pay rates and accessibility to housing seems to be a big obstacle for youth. Lower wage positions and hospitality doesn't offer work from home, which is uh, I guess reasonings why that they've provided you. So that's some really good ones. There's about 15 more comments that are added. I'm going to give you a few minutes to respond before I move to the next mentee.
Since we have a moment, I'll just comment. One of the reasons why we may see the higher turnover among the younger population is it may be correlated with the fact that I mentioned earlier, the younger population, more and more of them are not having their first jobs until they're in their late teens or even when they're 20 years old. So if you think about for most of us probably on this call, if we had our first jobs when we were 14, 15, that's probably when we would have had the highest turnover in our jobs, right? When you're just entering the workforce. So part of what we might need to consider is if people's first jobs are when they're 18, 19, or 20, how does that change what things look like in the workplace for them if we're going to try and improve retention? Because it is obviously an issue if, say, 18 to 20-year-olds have the same turnover rate today that 14 and 15-year-olds did 20 years ago.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Donald. There's still some comments that are coming in that are really great. One is we've been sharing job postings. However, we receive very few applications. When we do, most resumes either do not match requirements of the position or the candidates are not sufficiently qualified. And this is definitely something we can utilize from a toolkit perspective to provide some insights and to get some added resources with respect to job postings and even where to share. Because I've realized job boards have are sometimes the least tapped into resource, and there are other resources that you utilize to look for jobs. So these might be good things to share as well. Okay, I'll give it one more minute before we move on because we're still getting responses. What a wonderful group. There's tons of information coming through, Donald, and it's really nice to see.
Then I will thank everyone for being so engaged and obliging my my four pleases. Definitely appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay, I'll give it one more minute and I will move on to the next question. I'll just read one more comment from the questions that are here. One of the responses are after having a good interview, and then when on the job, they are underperforming compared to what they advised when they were that they were strong in. How can we ensure good matches between both expectation and delivery, essentially? Right, which is a very fair, and I will say across the board is a general um, tough thing. An interview is a tough way to assess a person's expectations, and so we can absolutely add some tools to help you with that process. Okay, I think we've slowed down, so we're going to move to the next question. Just cognizant of time, what has worked well when hiring youth? So, in your, I know there are obvious challenges, but what are some of the things that have worked well? So, can you share positive experiences you've had with young workers? And what types of roles or responsibilities have youth been very successful in? So some of the questions that we have with respect to it is, are there particular strategies, partnerships, or outreach methods that have helped you connect with youth talent? And what kind of training, onboarding, or support has made a difference maybe in retention or performance? Oh, is it not changing for you guys? Okay, let me put that in. I've changed it, but it's not changing for you. Okay, give me one quick second. Is it working now for you guys? I'll give it a few minutes just to see if
Yes, people are saying it's working.
okay, perfect. Thank you, folks.
Are you seeing the answers come in now?
Yeah, I'm seeing the answers starting to come in.
Good stuff.
So just reiterating for this question, when we're asking what has worked well, we want to get a sense of what are some success markers for you that we can also use as best practices for other employers. So if you can share positive experiences of what types of roles or responsibilities have youth been successful in when they're in your workplace? Are there particular strategies or partnerships or outreach methods that you've utilized that have helped you connect with your youth talent? And how has youth impacted your workplace culture or productivity, perchance? I have some good ones here. I can read a few of them to you so far. So one of them is youth have been very successful with communication with customers and also putting them in leadership roles such as training. Um, with respect to outreach, we see hiring friends is a successful strategy because they work well together. It's doing a referral from friends or family. There's work experience collaboration with local schools used to provide far more applicants and hires. So working with your local and not to plug community service providers again, but I will, right? Because they are local, they do deal with schools and the like, and that is an opportunity to get it. The follow-up comment to this is this seems to have decreased significantly over the years and makes us wonder if schools have removed this from their offerings, right? So schools do provide applications and hires for some restaurants. One of our participants, they said they haven't had a chance to hire youth yet, but they have an opportunity coming from a local job fair. So that's an opportunity to take part in it, which is great. And with respect to the roles that youth play, good customer facing roles, but do not like to take challenges. That's what they've heard from their youth. So peer training seems to stand out as a huge model. They seem more comfortable learning with people of similar ages and opportunities in rural communities to partner with schools. There's some wonderful responses being shared in the chat. I'm going to give it one more minute before we move to the next question because I know we're tight on time, but we'd love to get as many responses as possible. I'll give it one more minute here. Oh, we have some folks out in Halifax. The Halifax Hospitality Fair here in Halifax has been great for general recruitment, but also at the last fair, there was noticeably more youth. Yeah, youth are participating, especially with us, because we have a lot of career fairs happening across the region. There is a lot of participation from youth attending, and often they're just looking for a job at this point, right? So that is great. Okay, perfect. I've got a few responses under the wire. I'm gonna move to the next question. If you're still typing, don't worry. I'm sure it will get your question in. If not, don't hesitate to send your responses to us via Donald. Okay, I'm going to move it to the next question. What would you like to see included in this toolkit? So as we work to build this toolkit, and we have a timeline that we're hoping to get this out to you in, but what specific tools, templates, or resources would make it easier for you to recruit and support your young workers? Would you find value in guides for onboarding, mentorship, or performance evaluation tailored to youth? Are there platforms you'd like help using more effectively? Would sample job descriptions, interview guides, or skill checklists be helpful? And are there any resources you'd like to share with youth to help them better prepare for the work? So essentially, what would you like? And we don't want to make it a robust literary novel for you to read. We want to make it something that's accessible for you, that's easy to use, and knowing that you are an SME, or just a restaurant that would like easy to access practical guides, we would love to be able to provide you some useful tools. I'll give you a few minutes to respond to this. I know we're almost at time, so I have one more question for you before you go. So I don't want to take away from it. So please bear with us as we get that one last question through. But there's some responses coming in right now, and I can happily share this with you. So folks have articulated that interview guides would be helpful. Information on where to find most and best suited candidates. Strategies for managers to communicate more effectively to youth. A peer mentoring guideline, strategies for youth to see conflict and challenges as positive learning opportunities. That's actually a very poignant point, and is something that needs to be worked on for sure. We're definitely seeing some of the challenges there. There's some great other responses. So setting expectations, commitment, team mentality, onboarding and orientation, understanding your peers, managing the differences, so conflicts, how to build soft skill development into early training programs, and tips and tricks to make jobs more appealing for youth that still adhere to industry standards and requirements. Okay. And I'm going to go to my last question because I know we're at time and I don't want to deviate from it. So if you have more, please do feel free to add it in here. And I will go to the next one. And our last question for the day is, what gaps do you see in your existing resources? So when you've utilized training programs or toolkits before, are there things that you find that are missing or unhelpful? Are there disconnects between what you need as an employer and what supports you receive? And how could existing resources be made more accessible, relevant, or action oriented? We're slightly over, so I will give you a minute to respond before I turn it back to Donald. We always need more time for discussion, Donald. But it's a very engaging group and they're responding and we've got tons of information, which is really helpful. So I'm looking forward to what we develop out of it for sure.
So I see there is a question in the chat. Ikram, did you want to answer it or do you want me to give an answer? It says Ikram wants to answer this question live, so I don't want to deny you the opportunity.
No, I thought I could just type an answer, but typically a youth worker is considered 15 to 29, 30, sometimes kind of pushing it. But yeah, that's what a youth worker is considered.
Yeah, and it depends on what definition you want to use. If you're looking at government-funded grant programs and things, they may have slightly different definitions or parameters, either from province to province or if it's the federal government.
Yeah. For Canada Summer Jobs, as an instant, just to add to the conversation, it's under 29, like, so it's 29 effectively and under, right? So you can access Canada Summer Job Grants, and they go up in November, right, for applications. So you usually work with your local MP and you put your application through and you just let them know and you go from there.
Yeah, there's a link on Restaurants Canada's website in the workforce development area to a fact sheet for the Canada Summer Jobs Grant, which has a bunch of really useful information. And I say a bunch, it's basically one page. It's easy to read, but it also has links to different parts of the Canada Summer Jobs Grant website to give you information on what you need to do to prepare to apply, how to apply, and that sort of thing. And we will be sending everybody who is a member of Restaurants Canada a reminder in September or October to be checking the website in October for the launch of the Canada Summer Jobs Grant, because that's when you need to apply. So Akasua, how have we done?
We've gotten a few here. I'm giving them one more moment like 1 more minute essentially to respond, but some of the responses are people learn differently. Important to include accommodations. So as an example, do they like reading job aid or is a training video better? What does short burst of training, the short bursts of training seem to be the best way to engage youth. Are some of the folks are saying in terms of gaps, resources are not always clear for more junior managers to utilize. And one of the other comments I've received is following up post onboarding, keeping the communication open to set the expectation that training and learning is an ongoing thing. That's a gap that they're facing. So how do we make sure that it's ongoing past your first orientation?
All right, great. So let's let people continue to respond, but
Perfect.
close off, if you want to just go to the last
Absolutely.
slide there, and we'll start wrapping up. But everybody can continue to put their information into the Mentimeter. I'm just going to start to close things off out of consideration for time. We're going to skip that slide. There we go. Yes, we are very appreciative of you taking your time to attend, as well as respond and give us your feedback. For the 29 or so people that are still here, thank you for sticking around. We want to extend a big thank you, obviously, to Akasawa and Ikram and the whole team at FirstWork for sharing their expertise and collaborating with us to support the industry. Just as a reminder, today's webinar was recorded. You'll receive the link along with the slides and resources by email. We would encourage you to stay connected with us at Restaurants Canada. Check out our upcoming webinars. They're all great. They may not all have dusty things, but they're all great. Check out our resources, our advocacy efforts on our website, our workforce development section, so that you can get the supports for workforce that you need. And feel free to connect with me through the workforce development page, or just shoot me an email to discuss your needs and explore potential solutions. So thank you once again. We hope you all enjoy the rest of your day and have a great weekend when it arrives. Maybe a long weekend if it is a long weekend, and if not, I hope it feels long for all the right reasons.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.